When I left home 6 months ago for a business project, I never imagined that day would become the biggest regret of my life. I live in a family house with my wife, her parents, and my mother, my pride, my queen, my first love. She's been crippled for years, confined to a wheelchair. But no matter her condition, she's always been full of grace and gratitude. I've always been around her, cared for her, bathed her, fed her, talked to her every morning before leaving for work. She used to say, "Son, even if I can't walk, I stand tall because of you." Those words were my strength. Then one morning, my boss told me I'd been chosen for a major project abroad. He said he couldn't attend and I was the next best person. I didn't want to go. Leaving my mother in her fragile condition terrified me. But she held my hand and said, "Go, my son. I'll be fine. You've done enough for me." I hesitated, but I eventually agreed, trusting my wife and her parents to care for her. They were family after all. Sometimes in life, you have to give people the benefit of the doubt, but I learned the hard way that not everyone deserves it. 6 months later, I came back unannounced, hoping to surprise everyone, especially my mother. I walked through the gate quietly, carrying gifts and excitement in my heart. But when I entered the living room, something felt off. The house was quiet, cold, lifeless. Then I saw her, sitting alone in her wheelchair by the window. I almost dropped my bags. Her face was pale. Her clothes were old and stained. Her hands were trembling. "Mom?" I whispered. She looked up slowly and smiled, but it was the weakest smile I'd ever seen. "My son," she said softly. "You came back." I knelt beside her, holding her frail hands. "What happened to you, Mom? Where's everyone?" Tears rolled down her cheeks. "They don't treat me well anymore," she said. "Sometimes they don't feed me until evening. Your wife barely talks to me. Her parents, they say I'm a burden. Some days I wear the same clothes for a week." I stopped asking for help. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. I could feel my chest tighten, my hands shake. This was the woman who gave me life, the one I promised to protect forever. I asked her, "Why didn't you tell me?" She sighed. "Because I didn't want to ruin your opportunity. I thought maybe they'd change. But people don't change, son. They just get bolder when kindness is mistaken for weakness." At that moment I made a vow. I wasn't going to yell or fight right away. No, I was going to let karma walk in quietly but strike loudly. I spent that night by her side, feeding her, changing her clothes, bathing her, doing everything she'd been deprived of. The next morning I called my lawyer. A week later everything changed. The house, which belonged to my late father and my mother, had been placed under my care after her accident. But because she was in a wheelchair, I allowed my wife's parents to live with us so they could help. That mistake ended the day I returned. When my wife and her parents came home from the market that afternoon, they met me sitting in the living room beside my mother, holding the house documents. "Steve, you're back," my wife exclaimed nervously. "You should have told us you were coming." I smiled coldly. "If I had told you, you'd have hidden what you've done." Her father frowned. "What are you talking about?" I stood up. "About how you treated my mother like trash while eating from her house. About how you let her starve, left her in filth, and laughed behind her back." My wife started crying. Her mother tried to speak, but I raised my hand. "Don't bother explaining. My lawyer has already drawn up new documents. This house, every property linked to me, is now under my mother's trust. You have 1 hour to leave." They froze. My wife shouted, "You can't do this." I looked at her and said, "You made my crippled mother cry bitterly, now watch karma cry for you." I walked them out one by one. No yelling, no fighting. Just silence and tears. The kind of silence that makes guilty people tremble. When they left, I turned to my mother. She was crying, but this time it wasn't from pain, it was relief. She whispered, "You didn't just stand for me, son. You stood for every mother who's been forgotten." I knelt down and said, "You're my reason for everything, Mom. The world will never see you as weak again." That evening, as the sun set, I sat beside her wheelchair watching her smile faintly at the sky. I finally understood what she meant years ago, that kindness should never be mistaken for weakness. This story reminds us that kindness is a sacred strength, not a weakness. When we care for our parents, we are honoring the very roots that made us who we are. But when people repay kindness with cruelty, life has its own way of balancing the scales. Karma doesn't always come with thunder or noise. Sometimes, it arrives in silence, wearing the face of truth. Those who mistreat the helpless forget that time watches everything. One day the same hands they ignored may be the only hands left to help them. So never despise the weak, the old, or the dependent. For the way we treat those who can do nothing for us reveals who we truly are. Love and respect for our parents are not duties, they are the measure of our humanity. And remember, when kindness is betrayed, justice doesn't shout. It simply arrives, calm but unstoppable. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more emotional and dramatic stories about revenge, betrayal, and redemption in marriage and family life. Thanks for listening.